everybody. Welcome to the Get Real podcast. I'm your host, Blaine Mengel. Today we're going to talk about an age-old question. The question is one word: why? Right? Ever since I've been a kid, that has been a paramount question. And, a lot of people have said that has been a detriment in my life, that I ask why. But why allows me to continue to seek. It allows me to not accept things that I absolutely can change, right? But more importantly, it allows me to question authority. And as kids, I don't know if you remember this, but I was told by teachers, by parents, by significant, sometimes well-meaning people in my life to just do as I say. We're not supposed to question authority. We're not supposed to question why we do this and why we do that and why they're teaching us what they're teaching us in school and why does mom do this? Why does dad say that? And I was always one that questioned. Now, I did a lot of that questioning in my mind, in my head, so it kind of ate me up at times because I wasn't getting answers in my mind or in my head. I had to seek outside of myself, as I learned that later. So before we go any further with that, today's episode brought to you by Gamma Copolymer Polyflex fishing line, Gamma Torque braided fishing line, and Gamma Edge fluorocarbon line. Abrasion resistant, the Polyflex, the Copoly line is just an absolutely fantastic all-around fishing option, whether you're fishing rocky rivers and lakes, whether you're fishing weedy ponds and and streams. If I'm fishing cold, clear water, I'm going with the Edge fluorocarbon. If I want a leader onto my Gamma Torque braided line, I'm going to use the fluorocarbon, the Edge fluorocarbon. Dale Black is the owner, Black Knight Industries, Gamma Fishing Line. If you want more information, please reach out to me and I'll get it to you. Today's quote is going to kind of coincide with the topic. This is a quote from personal growth, finance, building guru Bob Proctor. He was pretty paramount as I transitioned out of being a missionary and into some of the online marketing and online space that I was doing with my business, and now even going into, back into bass fishing and into this movement that I'm going into to try and uncover things. The word apocalypse does not mean the end of the world, folks. It means to uncover what has been hidden, to unmask. And that's what we're going to do here. Yeah, we're going to talk about fishing because a lot of my perspective on unmasking, on truth, and on life as a whole, on personal growth, comes from my countless thousands of hours that I've spent on the water. Because there is such a significance to water. And we'll talk a lot about that moving forward. You're made of 80% water, right? And, let's be honest, our first 9.5 months of our lives are spent in the water of the womb. So we'll get into more of that later, but I want to share this quote from Bob Proctor, and I've heard this numerous times. If you just go to YouTube and listen to some of Bob's, seminars, you'll hear him talk about this very often. He says, dissatisfaction is a creative state. You can be happy and you can be grateful for where you are in your life, but if you haven't reached or achieved your goal, don't be satisfied. We can let that marinate for a minute and think right back to the Judeo-Christian scriptures. Really, I don't believe that the creator in those scriptures was actually satisfied at all. Why would he need to have used his creative power, which was his words, to create man in his own image? And then to take Adam, in the Hebrew, Adam, and use verbiage, and I don't have the word in front of me right now, but the idea is ezer kenegdo, which basically, very simply, ezer means to rescue, to save. In biblical terms, it's a military term. In order, it's to add strength or to rescue or to save. Kenegdo basically means to complement or complete. So when it's said that man should not be alone in Scripture, it didn't mean he was lonely. It didn't mean he needed a helper or helpmeet. It's this idea of ezer kenegdo. He was incomplete without his other half. And that is so beautifully symbolized and signified when a particle of energy from the man passes through the darkness and chaos of the womb of the water to a particle of energy from the womb man, and there's a flash of light, let there be light. This is powerful when you actually grasp this idea of creation. Creative energy, the other half of that, he's not complete without that. It is beautifully signified in the creation of a child. Okay? We'll talk more about that moving forward, but this idea that Bob talks about of not being satisfied, I think that's a big part of why I always ask that question, why? I started asking that question from my childhood. Well, why does Dad have to work every day? Well, why did this happen? Well, I don't know why. Why are we learning fractions in school? Why can't I just play baseball? Why do I get sad when I hear certain tones in music? All these questions, I was just constantly asking why. But the problem I had as a child is I also had this, I don't know if it was genetic or if I learned it or if I acquired it, I'm not really sure. But I always had this idea that I shouldn't ask the question out loud. I should have the dialogue in my mind. And I had a mentor who used to say to me, Blaine, your mind is like a bad neighborhood. You should not go up there alone, because I get into this hamster wheel thing where I'm just asking myself constant questions, but I'm not doing it to seek an answer, right? And that Judeo-Christian scripture book says, seek and you shall find. And when I started, when a question would manifest itself in my mind, not in my brain, they're two different things. But when a question would manifest itself, I would internalize it and I wouldn't seek an answer. Well, as I grew and got more uncomfortable with not getting the answers that I was seeking, because I was seeking, but I would stop the seeking process because I was afraid to outwardly ask a question or to outwardly even seek, because, well, you just have to comply, right? You have to do it the way they say, whether they are the system of religion, education, government, parents, guardians, whatever it was. I had to just comply. And if I heard this once, I heard it 100 or 1,000 times. Just do as I say. Just do as I say. In other words, and that the way that processed in my mind, don't question authority. Just do as they say. Pay your taxes and shut up. Go get a job and shut up. Whatever you do, don't pursue something that's going to bring you any pleasure, because even in that book, in the Judeo-Christian book, there's this, and it's human nature. Duality is human. If there's bad, there's going to be good. If there's lack, there's going to be riches. If there's hot, there's going to be cold. I would rather you be hot or cold, it says in the book of Revelation. But if you're lukewarm, in other words, if you can't make a decision, you're going to get spit out. So I ask the question why a lot. And, a perfect example. I'm sitting in school, 4th grade. My 4th grade teacher is talking about fractions. I don't care about fractions. Now, if you're an engineer or you're going to teach people math or whatever, and you like math and fractions, by all means, stay attentive in that situation. I wanted to play baseball. I wanted to sing. I was just clueless when it came to math and fractions. So my mom gets a phone call that evening, and she comes to me and she says, I just got a call from your 4th grade teacher. And I said, because the only time you ever got a call from the teacher was when you were in trouble. And I was always walking around feeling guilty or shameful about something, so I automatically knew I was in trouble. So I said, what did she want, Mom? Well, she was questioning what you were doing in school today. I said, what I was doing in school today? Well, yeah, she said, I think he's not paying attention. He's not listening in school. He's sitting there with a pencil and he's rolling up little pieces of paper and tossing them up in the air and just hitting the pieces of paper with a pencil across the desk. And my mom said, I told her, yeah, he's just playing baseball. and my mom knew what I was doing because my mom had seen me do it over and over again. I would just kind of go off and be by myself because I didn't understand people. I didn't understand why did people say these things? Why did they do these things? Why did they act this way? Why were some people mean and some people nice? I just had no understanding, and to a detriment, I suppose at that time in my life, I never voiced it. So instead, I would go into my fantasy world. Now, in this system of education, you can't sit in your fantasy world and imagine yourself playing baseball when your teacher's trying to teach you the curriculum that is set in place by this system, which is trying to create workers to plug into their system and not thinkers who would use their imagination to actually create the way we were created to be. So here's the question. Do sheep ask why? Do most of the people that you see getting in their vehicles every morning and going to a job that not all of them, but a lot of them despise, they hate it, they're not happy there, they don't like who they work for, they don't like who they work with, and they're underpaid. Do you think they're asking why? No, because they've already been told the answer to the why. The why is, well, because I have bills to pay. Why? Because, we have a mortgage. Why? Because we have a vacation coming up. Why? Because I need a new car. So, in other words, the system has created the answer to our why. And here's the deal, guys. You were given a mind. The brain processes what the mind brings to it. And I'll just leave it at that. We'll get into more of that later. But to believe what everybody else says, is that cool? When it doesn't elevate my state of being. It does not elevate my frequency to be walking outside of what I believe to be true and to what I believe is my actual purpose on this planet. And I've got news for you. You're a unique created being, created by two people whose particles of energy came together and created you. Out of millions of sperm, you made it up the river and hit that egg, that particle of energy, and they came together and created you. Do you think you're supposed to do what everybody else does? Do you think you're supposed to be just like everybody else? Or do you think you have a special nature about you? Or are we all just like earthworms and we just all supposed to do the same thing and eventually get put on a fish hook and die? So what are your why questions today? I mean, seriously, look yourself in the mirror and what question would you like an answer to today? Here's a perfect example. When I was learning how to catch smallmouth bass in the Delaware River, I thought I knew everything. Like I knew I didn't know everything, but when I'd get on the water and, you're on the water and you catch a couple bass, you think you know everything. And then I finally figured this out. And so I decided I was going to, guide full time on the Delaware River. And guiding full time meant I needed to have income coming in the wintertime. And my mentor said, I guess you're going to have to figure out how to catch those fish in the wintertime. And I went out, I don't know, I'm going to say probably half a dozen or 8 times. One winter, the first winter I had my jet boat, I had, started to figure out how to catch bass when it was easy to catch bass in the summer and then in the fall. But when the water got below 40 degrees, I was having a hard time figuring it out. And I'd sit in the warmth of my house, in the warmth of my, my room, and I would read articles about how other people were doing it. And my mentor said, get out on the boat and figure out how to catch fish. And I argued with him, and I thought, well, I am, but I'm preparing myself. I want to know what hair jigs to throw, and I want to know what grubs to have and what size tubes should I be throwing, what weight, and where should I be fishing, and how should I be locating these fish, and blah, blah, blah. He said, go out in the water and do it. Now, he was a roofer, guys. He was a roofer. And I was basically just fighting this. So long story made shorter, I went out on the river, and I was out there probably 6 or 8 times and had one small 13-inch smallmouth out of all those trips. And I'm out there one day, and I had designated this one area as a wintering area. I knew the fish were there. It was 12 to 16 feet deep. There was a lot of good rock cover. There was a transitional bottom, which today I know smallmouth like in the wintertime. They like a softer bottom, maybe like an area that had grass, area where carp might hold in the summer, and something with boulders and ledges merging with that softer bottom. And I thought, okay, this is a great place to fish. And I wasn't doing nothing. I was probably there an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours. I don't remember. And I was daydreaming. I was throwing a hair jig in this hole, and I was daydreaming, and I'm looking at the west facing bank all the way across the river. And the sun's on that bank, and I'm starting to kind of think, I'm like, okay, well, there was a grass bed there in the fall. There were shad fry there in the fall. Bait fish were all over the grass. I was catching bass there until mid-November. And I'm like, the water levels are elevated, so that would push the fish tighter to the bank. So just on a gut, a gut feeling, a hunch, I went over there and I positioned my boat, dropped my trolling motor, and proceeded to calmly and excitedly catch 6 smallmouth between 18 and 20 and a half inches long on hair jigs, all right off that bank. And I mean, I was in my glory. I went to my buddy at the tackle shop. I said, dude, look at these pictures. He's like, we're going tomorrow. We went the next day. We caught 13 fish that day, all really nice, big quality winter smallmouth. Now, I was asking the question all the time, why can't I? Now think about that. Why can't I? There's a negative in there. There's already a negative frequency being transmitted into my brain, into my mind, I should say, into my mind, and I'm processing it. Why can't I? Let's figure out why I can't. Instead of, what do I have to do to catch fish? How can I? How do we change the question? Okay, that why question was, why can I? I changed it to, how can I? Right? And I started to allow my mind to imagine, to create a different scenario. This is powerful when you actually understand it, because let's face it, as kids, the 4th grade teacher, the piece of paper and the pencil, our imaginations are squashed a lot of times as children. We're not supposed to imagine things. We're not supposed to do that. We're supposed to come back to reality. We're supposed to fit in to what the system of education and religion and, finance and government, what they tell you to do. Just comply, be a good sheep, and we'll lead you to, where do sheep get led? To the shearer, and they're not supposed to open their mouth? I wouldn't say I believed that I was going to go over there and catch bass, but I was willing to create a different scenario. I was willing to try it. And I answered my question, how can I, instead of why can't I? So there is a why question out there, that probably isn't a real healthy, word the question differently. Words create. Life and death is in the power of your words. That's why you spell words. We'll get into more of this in coming episodes. It's called spelling for a reason, because when you're speaking certain words, think if you take the S from the end of the word words and put it in the beginning, it's a sword, right? So words have a lot of power. And if you're not getting the results based on what you're speaking, and you're speaking from what you're thinking, change the way you're speaking. Change your words. So ask yourself today, what's your biggest why questions? I can share mine. Why in the world is this system set up the way it's set up? Now, if you didn't hear my last episode 3, called House's Plot, do me a favor and go back and listen to that, because there's a quote in there that, as I talk about this why question of mine from my heart, from my spirit, it answered it in a lot of ways. It was literally the tipping point for me, that quote. So go back and listen to the previous episode called House's Plot. Why is this system the way it is? Why do I have to work a job? Why are they taking taxes out of my wages? And I started to do some research over the last several months. I started reading the UCC, U.S. Code. I started reading about specific amendments and laws, and that was something that I just had no interest in whatsoever. I started learning about the origin of the Federal Reserve and banking, the 1666 Sesta Act, the 1871 additions to our Constitution, and how we basically lost a lot of our God-given unalienable rights after 1871, and how the timeline just totally fits perfectly now. I started to get some answers to that question. You know, why aren't we growing our own food? Well, because, my gosh, look at technology and, inventions. And it's so much easier to just get in your car and go to the store and purchase your your food. All our food is tainted with chemicals and poisons. And remember, this is for entertainment purposes only. I might not know anything. So whatever I'm saying here, it's just for entertainment purposes. Monsanto, everything that's going in your foods, why aren't we growing our own foods? Why are thousands, tens of thousands of illegal immigrants pouring into our country, thinking that this is the land of the free and the home of the brave? Is that really why they're here? Why are there wars? Is it all over oil? Is it all for money? Really? Why? What's your why today? And I'll leave you with this idea. When I used to ask that question a lot, when I was really starting on my journey of spirituality and personal growth, I used to say to my mentor, I did something and it probably wasn't the best, or it wasn't really good, or it was bad, or whatever. And his first question back to me, his first response was, well, why did you do that? Why did you say that? Why did you think that? And initially that reply would dumbfound me, because it would be like, it forced me to check my motives. It forced me to check on, the origin of why I even thought something was good or bad. Is it good or bad? Or is it just is? It just is. Can we possibly not be good, not be bad, not be evil, not be good? Could we just be? Is it possible to just be in a state of neutrality? And then my next question is what you're doing today allowing you to live in a higher state, or vibrate at a higher frequency? Or are you still subject to a system that breeds fear, anxiety, lack, bills, jobs, rushing around to get certain places and schedules? Check your motives for why you're doing what you're doing today. And I'll leave you with this. Just think of the word believe. B-E-L-I-E-V-E. Be the lie and live. Thanks for joining me today. Look in the mirror. Ask yourself why you're doing what you're doing today. And if you don't have an answer that suffices, you might want to start seeking. If you want to message me, donations are greatly appreciated. If you want to message me, email will be in the discussion below, the podcast, below the videos on YouTube, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Podbean, YouTube. Thanks for joining me. Have a great week, and don't forget to get real.